When Fire Emblem Engage first launched, it split the fanbase. For every player who loved its flashy battles and fan service-filled emblem mechanic, there was another who missed the slower, more character-driven drama of Three Houses. But there was one thing I think everyone agreed on. Engage was a visual showpiece. Even with dynamic resolution and some clear cutbacks, it made the most of aging hardware. So today, let's check it out on Switch 2. No patch, no upgrade, and yeah, answer the simple question: does Nintendo's new hardware help this ambitious strategy game? And for that, we'll be looking at visuals, frame rate, and load times to find out. If you are enjoying these Switch 2 performance breakdowns, a like or sub really helps the channel grow. We've been doing this now for over 7 years. Reviews, deals, deep dives, all that good stuff, and we are a smaller channel, so every bit of support, it makes a massive difference. So just quickly an overview, and the story in Engage is lighter than Three Houses. More anime, less politics. You play as a defiant dragon with memory loss, waking up after a 1,000-year nap to gather magical rings and stop a returning evil. It's got its emotional beats, but it leans hard into spectacle and nostalgia, especially through the Emblem system, which lets you summon heroes from past Fire Emblem games. Now gameplay-wise, it's faster and flashier than Three Houses, with more emphasis on grid-based tactics and less on time spent between missions. You know, gone are the long school life segments, replaced by a smaller hub where you prep and train. But this today isn't a review. There are plenty of those already. The game is incredible, so let's talk performance. So when I look at the Fire Emblem releases on Switch, Three Houses and Three Hopes were the ones that clearly needed the most help. So we covered those first. I honestly didn't even consider testing Engage at the time, but it's been requested more than a few times, so here we are. Now, why didn't I consider it? Because honestly, it's a great build, and the optimization was far better than those earlier entries. I actually figured any improvements on Switch 2 would be minimal, not worth the time. That said, it actually ended up surprising me in a few areas. So let's start with the visuals, and this is probably the area with the least change overall. Side by side, it's not far from identical. That said, there is a very slight clarity bump during regular gameplay. On Switch 2, the image looks just a touch sharper, especially in motion or when the camera pulls back. But that extra sharpness comes at a cost. It draws more attention to the game's rougher edges, and that is aliasing on the environments and characters. So yeah, I guess they just stand out more now. The cutscenes then as well, they appear identical. Now, like Three Houses, however, Engage uses a dynamic resolution system, though I'll say it was far less aggressive. Three Houses would drop hard and often, especially in busier scenes. Engage, by comparison, holds near its target resolution much more consistently, even on Switch 1. On Switch 2, from what I've seen, it's locked there at all times. So yeah, while you won't see a dramatic jump, you are getting the most stable version visually of the image this game can offer, with fewer resolution dips. So yeah, it's not transformative, but it is cleaner, and for a grid-based tactics game where clarity matters, you know, that's not nothing. Let's talk load times then, because yes, they have improved on Switch 2. Now it's on screen, and it's not going to seem like a game changer, but Engage is one of those games with a lot of load screens. That was one of the things I remembered most after finishing it, how often you were kind of sitting there through transitions. You know, the initial boot into the game, first of all, maybe a split second faster. You won't be writing home about that. But loading into battles is where you start to feel it, around 25% quicker on Switch 2. The biggest difference though is at your hub, loading between smaller locations. So for example, out of your bedroom into the world. That takes about 20 seconds on original hardware. On Switch 2, it's around 10 seconds, so double the speed. And when you factor in how often you'll be bouncing between rooms, prepping for missions, or jumping into side content, it really begins to add up. So yeah, it's not a flashy, let's say, call it an upgrade, but if you're planning to spend serious time with the game, those seconds start stacking, and it makes the whole thing just feel snappier. Alright, onto frame rate, and in exploration, things are mostly what you'd expect. On Switch 2, the game holds a pretty solid 30 FPS. There are the occasional stutters, usually when the game world is being populated around you, but they are few and far between. On original hardware, it's a similar story, just a little bit less stable. The dips happen a little more often, and yeah, it just isn't quite as smooth. But again, this really just highlights what I said earlier. Engage was already an incredibly well optimized game. Where I was surprised though was actually in battle. On Switch 2, the frame rate is rock solid. I saw a couple of tiny dips, but honestly, being hands-on, I actually didn't feel them at all. On Switch 1 though, you do see more frequent movement. Nothing disastrous, but enough to make certain sequences feel a little rougher. One area where the improvement is immediately noticeable is in battle transitions. You know those moments where you trigger an attack and the game zooms in for a little quick cutscene style animation before pulling back out? On Switch 1, those transitions would always stutter for a split second, the engine catching up with itself. You know, it was zooming in and it would just freeze very kind of momentarily. On Switch 2, they're now just incredibly smooth. There's nothing there, in fact, at all. It is just straight in, straight out. It's a small thing, sure, but over the course of a long campaign, those transitions, you do notice a stutter on Switch 1 every single time. On Switch 2, fighting that makes everything just feel more polished. So I think overall with this one, look, would I be rushing back to play Fire Emblem Engage on Switch 2? No, not because of the improvements found here. They're not game-changing by any means, you know? The load times are faster, the visuals are a bit more stable, and the battle transitions feel smoother. But these are nice to have at most. Quality of life bumps. You know, you look at Free Houses, Free Hopes, the improvement we saw there, not even close in comparison. That said, I would return to this game just because it's an incredible experience. Whatever your take is on the story, the core tactics are some of the best the series has ever had. And on Switch 2, you're getting the most consistent, most polished version of that experience, even without a patch. So basically, if you decide to replay it, or you're thinking about diving in for the first time, this is going to be a great way to do it. So yeah, that is Fire Emblem Engage on the Switch 2. Will you be diving in for the first time or replaying it? Let me know in the comments. Then subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Helps out the channel a huge amount. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers all.